All right, hey everyone, this is Jackson Rodriguez, and today I'm going to be going over Module 3, which is College Athletes as Employees, Labor Law, and Collective Bargaining. So, I'm going to hit on kind of all that, mostly collective bargaining. I thought that was the most interesting. So, yeah, we'll get right into it. Also, I have the creakiest chair of all time, so if you hear that creaking throughout the video, I'm really sorry. But we'll get right into it. So, a couple things, two different kinds of laws, right? There's state laws and federal laws. So, state law apply to public entities, and federal law applies to private employers engaged in business, stuff like that. Okay, so one of the biggest things that we went over in this module is the National Labor Relations Act. So this act allowed employees a lot more rights than they were used to. So you have the right to join or assist unions, right to engage in collective bargaining with an employer over mandatory subjects. Those are hours, wages, terms and conditions of your employment, all very simple stuff, but very important stuff. Right to engage in concerted activity, basically another way of saying that you can go on strike if you want to. It also created the National Labor Relations Board, which is very important. They basically just help unions get off the ground and running, and if the union is no longer serving its purpose, they can decertify that union. Basically, just making sure that employees are able to unionize and stay unionized, like I said earlier, and then also if that union isn't doing anything, they get rid of them because it's a waste of everybody's time. So labor relations applied to professional sport, right? Dr. Saban hit it on in the video. Early on, this didn't have a whole lot of success. Very important part of sports and how they kind of got rolling. In the NFL, they weren't able to really change teams, right? There was no free agency. And so, obviously, as a player, that's not very good, not beneficial for you. And then Dr. Saban used the example, right? If there's only one place, if I'm going to look for a job and I can only work at this one place, right? And I can't go find any other options, they're going to have a lot more control over me than they should. So, wasn't very healthy. And so, obviously, that's been turned around in sports, right? And that kind of leads us into collective bargaining, which is where I'm going to spend most of the time. I actually thought this was really, really interesting. I know that I hit it on it a little bit in the discussion board, and I hate to be the guy that keeps saying it, but I played college athletics for 2 years here, and then 2 years in junior college, and then now I'm actually on staff as a grad assistant for our baseball team. So this kind of was really interesting to me to look at from a professional side, and how this applies to pro sports, and then also how this is not a thing by any means being a college player. So, right, collective bargaining. What is it? Basically, it's whenever the employees and the employer get together to talk about pretty much anything that's going to go on in their contract or their employment. Like I said earlier, there's a couple mandatory things. And so the mandatory subjects are hours, wages, and then terms and conditions of employment. Like I said earlier, very simple stuff, but it's things that if you don't go over, right, you can get really taken advantage of as an employee. And then kind of relating this to sports, right? If you're a player and you don't kind of cross your T's and dot your I's in this regard with the collective bargaining agreement, you can kind of get taken advantage of as a player and not be in a work environment that is up to par with where it needs to be. So interesting things to consider, right, in terms of sports. For collective bargaining agreements and regular jobs, I guess you could say, probably not the most, I don't know if there's a better way to describe that, but jobs outside of sports, right? Long careers, right? Whatever you're going to be. Dr. Saban, I think, used the example of being a carpenter, right? You're going to be a carpenter for a long time. Whatever you want to talk about, right? That employment period, you're going to be employed for a very long span of your life, right? Over 40, 45 years, right? Well, in sports, it's not the case. In the NFL, especially, careers are very short, especially with certain positions, right? I think of running backs immediately. It seems like every year, there's running backs that were really good for 3 years, and then they're done, and they're just at the tail of their career and out of their career. So if the turnover is really quick, right, and you're only going to be in this career for, right, if you have a 10 to 15 year NFL career, that's unheard of most of the time. You want to make sure that you're getting compensated in a way and treated fairly in a way for that short amount of time to set you up for success after football, right? Take the NFL out, insert the MLB, NHL, any NBA, any professional sports league, right? You got to do a good job to make sure that you're represented well. And so the players will actually do that, right? So one thing that I talked about earlier, or I didn't bring this up earlier, I should have. That was in the module, right? There is a right for representation of all kinds of players, right? So in the NFL, right, we can use that as an example. Pretty big league, obviously, right? For collective bargaining agreements, we can't just represent the top end guys, right? We have to represent the guys that are kind of journeyman NFL players or guys that are fighting for a spot on the practice squad, right? You have to make sure that you represent all employees, right? Same in the workplace. Can't just represent the managers. You have to represent all the way from the top all the way to the bottom, right? So with the CBA, right, the collective bargaining agreement, they're generally done for about 10-ish years, right, across the sports leagues. I think the NFL is 11, if I remember correctly. And so you're trying to make sure that you represent every single guy to take care of everybody throughout the collective bargaining agreement, right? So the mandatory subjects, like I hit on, hours, wages, terms, and conditions. Then there's permissive subjects, right? That's anything not defined in those three above. Right, but there's other subjects that are mandatory, right? So like for sports, drug testing is a big one that's mandatory. So obviously if you're a player, you want to do a good job of making sure you know when, how, and the conditions of your drug testing, right? So I think that these get really, really tricky because of how long they go, right? So you want to make sure you set yourself up for success for a long period of time. And then it's kind of two teams, right, fighting against each other, right? So the players want to have the most control over their careers they can have, and the management is trying to keep the most control that they can have, right? So they're really important, and at times they can lead to strikes and lockouts and different things like that, where if the managers aren't happy, it'll be a lockout. Players aren't happy, it'll be a strike. Just trying to make sure they get on the same page. With collective bargaining, there's some different things along that that are important. Arbitration is a big one. And so basically what that is you take an outside source and they kind of are the mediator, right? Well, there's mediation and arbitration, two different things. But basically are kind of getting everybody on the same page, right? So the way this looks salary-wise in MLB, there's a thing called arbitration. So after, I can't remember exactly how many years it is, but after your first couple of years, you're eligible for arbitration. That means you can't go directly into free agency, okay? But you and the team can renegotiate your contract, right? Now, this gets really interesting, and I didn't understand completely how this worked until reading up on this. But so the player can offer the contract that they want to be paid, right? Say, hey, this is what I want to be paid. And the team can offer the contract that says, well, we don't want to pay you what you want. We'll pay you what I want, right? And the arbitrator will come in and then decide which one is more fair based off the player's output, everything like that. And then they decide which contract gets paid. So this is really interesting because Dr. Saban hit on this. When they're going to pick one or the other, you got to make sure that yours is really, really fair, okay? Because you don't want to lowball the guy completely and the other guy go in there and say, well, I want to get paid the moon, and he actually says that the players is better. Well, then you're kind of screwed, for lack of a better term, right? Like you got to kind of hit the nail in the middle, right? Hit the nail on the head and be in the middle of all that. Another thing that we touched on in this module, salary caps. So in the NFL, right, you can only pay a team, a roster, a certain amount of money. Can't go over. They say this is to promote fair play, right? You don't want one team that has unlimited money and is in a big market just buying every good player, and then a team that doesn't have a whole lot of money in a small market can't get anybody, right? Looking at my notes here to see if there's really anything that I missed, right? There's some other things in the module. Those are kind of the big things. What I wanted to talk about more is how this relates to the college game, right? So there were two articles that we read. The first one was about Dartmouth basketball, right? And their players that had pushed for unionization, saying that they were employees because of, I believe the quote was, how much the school exercised so much control over their schedules and working conditions, right? So for me, this kind of hit close to home, right? Like I said earlier, played college sports, right? Long days. This is a subject that we talked a lot about in Dr. Saban's previous classes in undergrad. But as a college athlete, there's a lot of time that you're at that field or doing something in regards to your sport, and that team and that coach and the institution has a lot of control over you, right? And you don't get a lot of say, if we're being completely honest, which it's kind of a hard topic, right? Because they talk about the history of amateurism in the NCAA, right? And you're doing this for your love of the game. And I get that. I think that I'm probably more on the old school side of looking at this. I loved playing baseball. Thought it was really, really fun. Had a great time, met a lot of great people. So for me, it was like, you know what? if I got to be out here a ton of hours during the week, that's fine because I get to go play baseball and I love doing it, right? So I think that's a good way of looking at it, but there's also a part of it that now that I see, I'm going, man, like they had a lot of say over what I did, and I didn't really get a lot of say back, right? And so this Dartmouth case was kind of similar to the players realizing that and saying, hey, this is kind of ridiculous. They ended up ending their attempt. They didn't see it kind of going how they wanted to and pulled out of it. But it raised a lot of questions, right, for the NCAA and what they're going to do in the future. And now this was a couple years ago, so this wasn't in the full. I'm going to use this phrase because Saban's going to have to watch this. This wasn't in the wild, wild west of the NIL and transfer portal area, right? So this was a different era, right? Now I think it's even crazier because everybody's switching teams. People are getting paid unbelievable amounts of money, right? And so now you're going, well, this team has a lot of control over you. You're getting paid money, right? It feels like employment. And then the second article, Dr. Saban actually wrote, shameless plug, but Federal Appeals Court revives FLSA minimum wage claims, that article. Right, so this was kind of talking about a bunch of different cases. The main one that it highlighted was a group of college athletes led by Trey Johnson, who played at Villanova, basically saying the same thing, right? Like, hey man, like they said they were joint employees by the NCAA and their university, right? And so that they should be entitled to minimum wage at least, which very interesting, right? I think they're making a lot more progress now than I think they have in the past. But I think if I would have gotten paid minimum wage, right, as a college athlete for the time that I was out there, that would have been very, very helpful financially, right? Because it's really, really hard to go work a job when you're being a college athlete and get quality food and stuff like that. So I think that like these guys they're all good points, right? They're not just kind of shooting in the dark. But I thought it was really interesting to see both those cases and kind of how they go in terms of the CBA, right, collective bargaining, when I didn't get to go, like, vouch, right, for what I thought was fair in terms of my employment because I wasn't an employee, which is kind of what this whole thing's about, right? Are they employees? Are they not employees? So that's kind of the summary of this whole module. Like Dr. Saban said in the video, right, pretty fun module, I thought. I'm going to have the questions listed below in writing because I don't want everybody have to just re-listen to me ask the same questions over and over again. But thought it was really interesting. Please let me know in the discussion board below if there's any questions, stuff you had. It's only the second week we've done this. And so I believe Ashley was your name, did the video before me. She nailed it. So don't think this is going to be as good, but trying. So please give me any feedback. That'd be really helpful as we go throughout this course. So hope y'all enjoyed this. Like I said, the questions will be below. Thank you.